All right, let's talk Dallas Cowboys. I'm Nick, and this is our daily Cowboys show. It is Sunday, but of course, it is not game day. Dallas plays Monday night, but there is still a healthy amount of interesting stories, of course, as the Cowboys prepare for their primetime matchup, and we'll get to all that in just one second. But first, as we always like to on this channel, get things started with a little stat of the day, a little palate cleanser, if you will. And without further ado, let's pull this up courtesy of the PFSN X account. They posted the highest graded NFL offensive rookies entering week 9, according to PFSN's impact metrics. Number 1, Tyler Warren, the tight end for the Colts. He's having a phenomenal rookie season. He looks like a superstar. Number 2, how about this? Tyler Booker, the rookie guard for the Dallas Cowboys. Behind him is Armand Mimbaugh, a very good young offensive line for the Jets. Then Golden, then Arondé Gadsden for the Chargers, Tate Ratledge for the Lions, Bill Krosky-Merritt, and so on and so forth. Now, listen, I don't know anything about PFSN's metrics or how they ran this formula. When it comes to data points like this, I always try to see, okay, if it's a good, analysis, does it match the eye test? I know Tyler Warren's having a fantastic rookie season, for example, so to see him at the top of the list makes sense. I know Mimbaugh, Golden, Gadsden, and Ratledge, for example, are having really good rookie seasons as well. So the fact that they're at the top of the list makes me think this is actually some pretty good data, some pretty good analysis here. Now, I'm not familiar with PFSN's work, but again, it's one of those things, their data matches the observation, so I tend to think they're at least somewhat valid, which of course means that it's a really good sign that Tyler Booker is rated so highly. And it's one of those things when people talk about the Dallas Cowboys and the future of this football team and some of the issues they've had drafting in prior years. So far, when it comes to this draft, they seem to have hit B plus to A plus when it comes to Booker and, of course, Donovan Ezeraku with their first 2 picks. Shamar James, a 5th rounder, seems to be at the very least a situational linebacker for Dallas who can step in as a starter role if needed. So you're talking about a good depth piece. We'll see about Savone Revel going into the future as well, coming out of the bye, what he could be, maybe potential long-term starting corner. And then you have Jaden Blue, who, he's getting more touches, more activity over the past couple games. The fumble against Denver is a little disconcerting, but there is potential there. So there's a lot to like about this Cowboys rookie class. There's a lot of pieces there, and it speaks to the youth of this team and the fact they are going to continue to be young going forward, again, with 4 first-round picks over the next 2 seasons. But you got to hit on those picks, and so far with Booker being the first rounder and, of course, Ezeraku doing good things as a second rounder, at least in the 2025 class, they seem to have checked the boxes in terms of getting good rookie players, good future star players potentially, with 2 very critical picks, their first and second rounder. All right, let's get into the news here. This is courtesy of Nick Harris at the Fort Worth Star-Telegram. Cowboys head coach Brian Schottenheimer said there's a chance Donovan Wilson doesn't play with his elbow/shoulder injuries, called it closer to 50-50. It was reported as of last night that Donovan Wilson is out. He will not play. So that 50-50 chance went to a 0% chance of Wilson playing. Wanye Thomas migraine is trending in the right direction. He was actually a full participant in practice on Saturday, the first time he's been a full participant, at least according to the injury report, since he first started suffering migraine. So he's definitely trending in a good direction there. Still no Malik Hooker this week. He's supposed to come back off of IR potentially after the bye as well. And added depth will include Zion Childress. So obviously there's a lot to like there in terms of, well, not if you're a big fan of Donovan Wilson. I don't know if there are any fans of Wilson out there, but if there are, obviously disappointing that he won't be able to play tomorrow. When you look at Wanye Thomas, I'm a fan of just his story, his effort, his energy. So the fact that he seems to be trending in a good direction, I like to see what he can do. We talked about that a lot yesterday, so that's good. But I want to talk a little bit about the Zion Childress, right? Obviously was on the Cowboys practice squad, elevated as a depth piece a few times earlier in the season when they had injuries to corner, potentially to be a backup nickel corner or a situational player like that. He was then picked up by Houston off the practice squad. Houston then let him go. Dallas then added him back to the practice squad. And now he seems to be ready to potentially be activated as the emergency safety for the Dallas Cowboys this week, or Monday, I should say. Now, last week, if you guys remember, obviously with the injuries to the safety position, Dallas had Elijah Clark as one of their starters, and of course Marquise Bell as the other, Clark being the undrafted rookie. He did not play well, and then he got hurt to add insult to injury, so they had to put their emergency safety that would be Reddy Stewart in to be their third, essentially their third safety, moved into a starting role the second half, just to have bodies out there. Now, it seems to me, based on this reporting, and it's hard to tell right now because obviously the Cowboys aren't disclosing everything, that they have Zion Childress as one of their more I will say, safeties leaning toward being the emergency role player as opposed to Reddy Stewart this week. So to me, it means a lineup change has happened in the secondary. It seems, and I could be, reading maybe a little bit too much here, but it looks like Triqueze Bridges is going to be sent maybe back to the bench or get a little less playing time, and they're going to have a guy like Reddy Stewart slide in at nickel, move Deron Bland to the outside, and live with Kaiir Elam on the outside at one of the other corners. Now, it's possible they could come out with a bunch of different personnel packages and groupings. I mean, they've done that over the course of the season so far. But it seems to me that the Triqueze Bridges experiment, which they did with 2 starts, in which he gave up some big plays against Washington, but the pass rush really helped him out, and the defense did enough. And he played his butt off against Denver, but he just got beat virtually every single time. So it was a rough day for the 7th-round rookie. And I think the Cowboys seem to be, listen, we're Reddy Stewart. He's going to be playing nickel a lot for us Monday night and probably going forward. We're not going to have him be the emergency safety. We're going to have Childress be the emergency safety. And I think that's the right move. I mean, listen, Zion Childress, he knows the defense. Obviously, he was all training camp. He did a lot of preseason reps. He played safety in college, so he's a guy who knows how to play the position, at least at a baseline level, right? I mean, no different than, say, Reddy Stewart, certainly. And Triqueze Bridges, listen, I mean, you got to make decisions based on the product people put on the field. And while Bridges, I think, played his butt off, I think he really did, but he just had 2 really, really rough games. Denver was just a disaster game. And honestly, Washington, he did not have a good game either. He just kind of survived based on how the defense was doing around him. So I think it makes sense to have Deron Bland move to the outside, live with Elam as the other outside corner, and have Reddy Stewart in the nickel, right? I think that's where the Cowboys are going right here. Zion Childress being the emergency safety. And listen, I think I'm okay with that, right? If Reddy Stewart is actually going to be a guy that's going to play some nickel for the future, put him at nickel for the future. And I think that's a good point. If Zion Childress is a guy who can maybe be, the next Wanye Thomas kind of player where he works his way up through special teams and scratches and claws and eventually becomes a backup, put him in that position right now. And I think that's what the Cowboys are doing. And one of the issues with Dallas this season, and we've already talked about it a bunch, is that they're still trying to figure out their personnel at both linebacker, defensive line, and of course the secondary, namely the safety position. Obviously, injuries across the board, Overshown being hurt, Bland missing time, Diggs missing time, Hooker missing time, Wilson missing time, right? I mean, across the board, obviously Wanye Thomas with the migraines has missed a little time as well, Elijah Clark out. It makes it hard when you have all these injuries, right, to really nail down your personnel. But it does present opportunities, for example, in Reddy Stewart's case, or maybe even Zion Childress' case here, certainly in Wanye Thomas's case, for guys to make a name for themselves. Bridges had an opportunity, for example. He played a couple games, and it didn't work out. And it looks like the Cowboys may be sidelining him, at least in terms of being one of their starting outside corners primarily going forward. Now, maybe not. Maybe this is just a smokescreen, or maybe this is just a true, like, hey, Zion Childress is actually our 4th safety kind of thing. And maybe that's the case. But based on what we're hearing so far, it looks like the Cowboys are making some adjustments, and it looks like they're going to give Reddy Stewart more opportunities at nickel and Zion Childress more opportunities at safety, which I think is the right move to make. All right, this next report is courtesy of, once again, Nick Harris at the Fort Worth Star-Telegram. Good injury news this time. Cowboys head coach Brian Schottenheimer says center Cooper Beebe is on track to play against the Arizona Cardinals on Monday night. Hasn't played since week 2 when he suffered a lateral ankle sprain and foot injury. Foot injury kind of puts it mildly. He broke a bone in his foot. So it was a pretty gnarly injury that he had against the New York Giants. The way they've kind of phrased this, the Cowboys have, like, oh, he's on track, he's trending in the right direction. They've been playing a little coy with that all week. I mean, in all points, indications say that he's going to play, right? He got full practice the entire week, was really, really close to go against Denver. I just think they just are being cautionary. I just think saying, listen, he was coming off IR. There may be some, like, rules terms where you can't say, oh, he's going to play. And if you say he's going to play and then he has a setback on Monday and you sit him, then you get fined $200,000 or something. So that may be a reason for the verbiage on track to play as opposed to he's going to play. But at this point, it seems 99% chance he's going to play, which is good to see. I mean, listen, Hoffman did an admirable job in his absence for sure. But I do think over the past few weeks, teams started attacking Hoffman, and Hoffman did not play his best games at all, right? He started, the backup role strong, and over the past couple weeks, I think teams sort of game planned to get after him specifically. And listen, he didn't play great football. I mean, I think he still tried hard. He still competed. Still is a physical dude. All the good things you love about Hoffman. But I think getting Cooper Beebe back is one of those underrated additions because he's a good run blocker, good pass blocker, good athlete, smart player. Listen, is he the first team All-Pro? I don't think so. But he's just a good football player, good young football player who's going to be the leader of this offensive line going forward, and in some ways already is. So I think getting him back into the fold is a good sign for Dallas. All right, this next report is courtesy of John Machota. This is kind of interesting. He wrote first, Cardinals quarterback Kyler Murray will not start against the Cowboys Monday night. It will be Jacoby Brissett. Murray has a career record dating back to high school of 9-0 at AT&T Stadium as a starter. Cowboys coach Brian Schottenheimer later said, we've been preparing for Kyler, but we also had plans and knew that we could be facing Jacoby for whatever reason. I think this is kind of interesting, and it was a little humorous to me because the Cardinals were playing very coy. Are we going to go Brissett? Are we going to go Murray? Right? Murray is obviously the more dynamic one, but Brissett's more traditional, and Brissett's played really good football over the past couple weeks, filling in for Murray, and he's a veteran who's played a lot of good football in his career. I just think, to me, it's kind of funny that the Cardinals were being so coy about it because, like, with this Dallas defense, it almost doesn't matter, right? Everyone has, carved them up. Caleb Williams, Russell Wilson, right, have carved up the Dallas Cowboys. Jordan Love carved up the Dallas Cowboys. Bo Nix carved up the Cowboys. Justin Fields was probably the only guy that didn't, and he actually had some good volume when he had it was garbage time, but still, he had some good completions and good yardage too from his perspective, right? Jane Daniels had some plays before the Cowboys knocked him out of the game, and even Marcus Mariota had a few plays. Obviously, the Cowboys got him with a pick six and a couple other plays, but listen, I hate to say this, but because the defense is so bad and because they're still trying to figure out personnel and still trying to get people back, obviously Overshown after the bye, Revel after the bye, just to kind of figure out who they are, I don't think it really matters in kind of a weird way. It's sort of like, listen, you could play Murray, you could play Brissett. They're both probably going to still have outstanding days and put up a lot of yardage and points because it's a very, very bad Cowboys defense. All right, this next report here is courtesy of Diana Rossini. She writes, teams including the Rams, 49ers, Lions, Colts, and Eagles have called the Bengals about several players, including Logan Wilson and Trey Hendrickson. For now, some teams don't believe Cincinnati has any real interest in moving its core pieces. So we're at the time of year, right, obviously with the trade deadline Tuesday, that literally every single reporter, every single, insider, every single, writer is like, oh, I've got sources saying this is going to happen, or teams are calling about this and that. I mean, at this point, I think 30 teams have called the Bengals. I think the Bengals have called themselves to ask about Trey Hendrickson's availability. We've seen this in almost every single opportunity across the board. I mean, at this point, with the trade news and all the discussion about it, my advice and my thought is it's all a smokescreen. No one knows anything. No one's serious about anything until the deal is actually made. And when it comes to these insiders, remember, I talked about this yesterday, how they get a lot of their information, 95% of their information from agents. So theoretically, Hendricks' agent or Logan Wilson's agent or whoever is feeding this to Rossini saying, listen, we got a lot of guys calling, and maybe two teams calling, but they're trying to create and drum up this interest, right? So that way they can get someone maybe to overpay and give Hendrickson a lot of money because they feel like they really need him and are desperate. So I think a lot of this is just agents hyping up their own players at this point. I think maybe a few days ago or a week ago, some of these reports had a little bit more merit. But now that we've gotten close to the deadline, again, it's just Tuesday, a couple days away now. I think 99% of these reports are all just, in terms of teams calling this team or players that teams are interested in this player. I think it's all sort of a smokescreen coming from agents. I mean, I'm not blaming Rossini here. I mean, she's getting information from sources, and she can, of course, write about it and post it, of course. But I do think that none of this is real, right? It's all a message from agents and people with sort of ulterior motives pumping things to the media. We have no idea if this is anything valid behind any of these reports, whether they involve Dallas or some of these other teams or any other team for that matter. It's all just fog of war right now with what's going on right before the trade deadline. So my advice, don't take too much stock into anything you're hearing on this front. All right, so this was kind of interesting, and I wanted to talk about this pretty briefly. John Machota is a good beat reporter. Highly recommend you give him a follow. He said, Cowboys have had their share of disadvantages with injuries to CeeDee Lamb and along the offensive line, but they have also caught some breaks this season. Eagles defensive tackle Jalen Carter thrown out before the first play. Packers lose their top defensive tackle Devontae Wyatt. Commanders without wide receivers Terry McLaurin, Deebo Samuel. Commanders quarterback Jane Daniels misses almost all second half. Broncos quarterback Patrick Surtain injured early. Cardinals quarterback Kyler Murray not starting because of injury. That last one I think is a little interesting. There's some rumors in Arizona that they're actually potentially benching and maybe even trading Kyler Murray. We'll have to see what shakes out there. The new relatively new head coach, he's been there for a few years now in Arizona, reportedly is not super high on Murray, but that's just kind of scuttlebutt. It's hard to figure out if that's real or not. But anyway, this was my report, my response to it from our main flagship football channel, SMI Football Show, where we cover the entire NFL. And I wrote, this is really good persuasion here. Notice how he lumps the entire O-line into his opening sentence and then lists other injuries as individual bullets. The Cowboys' injuries are also listed in paragraph form, taking up 3 lines to look a lot less than the other team's injuries, 6 lines. And I've got nothing against Machota here, but this is how you create a narrative. And this is how, and I don't know if this was intentional or not or accidental, but I point this out here to make sure you guys, if you see reporting like this or see people talk about things like this or post things like this, understand this is narrative creation. Because if you look at the Cowboys' injuries, and they have injuries, every team has had injuries. Of course, it's the National Football League, except for like the Denver Broncos, who have been extremely healthy prior to the Surtain injury, right? And I think the Indianapolis Colts have been extremely healthy as well. Virtually every team has injuries, right? And by the way, it's no surprise that the Broncos and Colts, really healthy for most of the season, combined 3 losses, right? Health matters. But if you look at, the way Machota structured this, right? He talks about the Cowboys have had their injuries. Notice how he lumps them all together, right? Along the offensive line, right? We know that 4 of the 5 positions have had guys out. BB's been out a lot. Booker missed a lot of time. We know Smith missed a game. We know Guyton missed a game, right? We knew there was a lot of injuries that the Cowboys have dealt with on the offensive front, just on the offensive line. So 4 guys right there. But he doesn't list bullets there. He lists them, just all together in 3 words, the offensive line, right? Notice he doesn't list Kevontae Turpin or DeMarvion Overshown or Trayvon Diggs or Deron Bland or Donovan Wilson or Malik Hooker or, you can even throw in a guy like Miles Sanders, Marshawn Nealon missed time. If you want to throw in Sanborn, if you throw in no injury in there, although I'm not really counting that one in my book, right? It's one of those things where right now the narrative is, the Cowboys, they've had a few injuries. They've had a few. Look, it takes up 3 lines. But look at these other teams. Look how much beat up they are, right? And you can see the persuasion. It's really good. It's really effective in terms of establishing a narrative where you sit there and say, the Cowboys have had some, but look at all these other things listed by bullets. And list persuasion is very powerful, right? It's something to look out for. If someone doesn't have anything that's true on its merits, but you can rattle off a list, like a bullet list, it's very persuasive because even if it doesn't make sense, you're like, well, that's a lot of bullet points there. That's a lot of information. There must be something there. You see this happen all the time, right? In terms of, you'll see this in businesses when companies publish a lot of, their quarterly reports, or you see this inside a company when a manager's trying to report up the chain, trying to sell himself higher. What do? They create a long list and, they kind of wear you down with a bunch of bullet points. You're like, okay, well, you've been talking for a while and there's a lot of stuff on the screen, so something must be going right. It's very persuasive. It's very skilled. But there's another element here that also, and I'm curious if you guys pointed this out, and this is another persuasion skill in terms of establishing a narrative. You look at the 2 comparisons here. They were comparing one team, Dallas, that's the first 3 lines, to Dallas's opponents, which obviously at this point in the season has been 8 different teams. So you're comparing one team and the aggregation of their injuries to the aggregation of 8 teams' injuries, right? But they don't word it that way, right? It looks very much like, because they separate it out, it almost looks like, the Cowboys are equivalent to 8 different teams. But you don't look at them, when you read it, you don't get that initial impression. Right. And again, I don't know what Machota's goal here is. I don't think he has any nefarious motive, but this is something to look out for when you're following sports, watching sports, or just in life in general. When you see persuasion like this, right? When you see, a long list of bullet points, when you see, apples to oranges, one team versus 8 team comparisons, right? When you see, stylistic differences and comparisons where paragraph form condensed, comparing the other team's injury, bullet points longer, trying to, visually make one look longer or more impactful than the other. They're trying to send a narrative. They're trying to make a point, right? They're not dealing in facts and truth, right? Even though the statement itself may have truth in it, nothing he said here is, categorically false, but he's shifting it in such a way to set out a narrative to persuade to a certain point. There's nothing wrong with that. I just want to point that out for everyone watching. And I do it too. We all do it. It's just a fact of life. But it's just something to keep in mind when you see, anyone out there try and use these kind of persuasion skills. Understand they're trying to establish a narrative. And when you see it, guys, you can't unsee it. But once you do see it for what it is, it becomes a powerful tool in your tool belt, because then you can see through other people's BS. You can see, okay, you're trying to trick me. What are you hiding? What are you obfuscating? And that can be a very powerful tool in your tool belt, whether in work or just in life. All right, this next report is courtesy of the Underdog NFL X account. Pretty short, as you guys can see. Adam Schefter writes, Adam Schefter, I guess, reported that Dolphins are expected to ask for first-round pick and more for their wide receiver, Jalen Waddle. There's been some conflicting reports when it comes to the Dolphins and Jalen Waddle. Kind of like I said before, there's a lot of these insiders are getting information from the agents. But I just want to take, just for argument's sake here, let's say Schefter has the inside scoop and the Dolphins are actually asking for a first-round pick and more for their young wide receiver. But I think this is really important because a lot of people look at the trade deadline and they just assume we can get a good player for cheap. We can get a good player for something. The reality is it's very hard. If Jalen Waddle's, he's not a top 5, not a top 10 receiver. He's a good receiver. Don't get me wrong. You can make an argument he's not the best wide receiver when Tyreek Hill is healthy on his team, right? I mean, it's he's a good player. He's a good locker room guy. He's very productive. Good culture guy, great set of skills, athletic tool belt for sure, phenomenal player, good pedigree, checks every single box of being a good player. But the reality is, guys, even though he's not great, teams are going to expect a lot for really good players. So when you look at, who's available, I want Dallas to go get this guy or go get that guy. If you're not willing to part with a first round pick or a second round pick and a bunch of other tools, maybe 2 seconds or something like that for a good player, it probably ain't going to happen. Because if you're the Dolphins, why would you trade Jalen Waddle away for a third round pick? What do you have to gain? Right? You have nothing to gain doing that. And that's the way with guys like Hendrickson or other good players. The Bengals have no incentive to just let Hendrickson give him away, right? They don't. Now, if it's sort of a second tier guy or a guy who's a locker room malcontent or he's on the wrong side of 30, he was good in 2021, but it's 2025, he's a little beat up, whatever it may be. That's a situation where things might happen. For example, Jair Alexander recently got traded to the Philadelphia Eagles from the Baltimore Ravens. Alexander wore out his welcome in Green Bay. He got shipped to the Baltimore Ravens, and the Ravens had him in their facility for a couple months and was like, we don't think this guy's any good anymore. They never played him. Healthy scratch. And so they sent him to Philadelphia. And there was a lot of people that are like, oh, Eagles, they got a good corner here. Maybe if it was 2023, but there's a reason the Ravens, who were desperate for cornerback help, made him a healthy scratch and started young guys. They just didn't think he had anything left in the tank. There could have been some scheme fit issues too. But the reality is, if there are good players that are available that are long-term additions, Jalen Waddle is going to be a good player for a long time. You're going to have to give up a lot for him. So if you're the Dallas Cowboys, I think you got to be very careful in terms of who you go after and the price you surrender for it, right? And I think they are. But there's a lot of people out there like, oh, the Cowboys should get that guy or that guy or that guy or whatever it may be. And he's still got 2 or 3 years left on his deal. He's still 28. I'm like, yeah, I get all that. But the reality is he's going to be very expensive. And the question we'll have to ask, is it worth the cost? All right, this next report, I think is just kind of interesting to me. This is from Eli Berkovitz, who's a big Packers fan, who's a big Packers account. He was responding to a post on X from Kalshi Sports, which I think is a gambling site, if I remember correctly. And he says, talking about what's the loudest crowd pop in sports history. And Eli Berkovitz, again, a Packers guy, says, not the loudest, but I'll take any excuse to relive this moment. And it was the play, and I have a screenshot there of Micah Parsons getting a chase down sack when his first game with the Green Bay Packers against Detroit Lions and Jared Goff, when the Packers were winning by 3 touchdowns week 1. All right, and here's the thing that I think is very interesting here, and maybe I'm a little biased, and I probably am, but it's important to understand this, Cowboys fans, and I think I've started to realize this too, is that a lot of the NFL, and you have this is a Packers fan, a Packers writer. Green Bay Packers are one of the top 5, 6 storied franchises in football history. Brett Favre, Aaron Rodgers, Jordan Love, right? They've won championships, they won the Super Bowl in the mid-90s, and they won a Super Bowl, obviously, with Aaron Rodgers. So, they have championship success in their recent history. They made the playoffs the last 2 years. By God's sake, they embarrassed Dallas a couple of years in the playoffs. So it's, again, in 2023, right? So, again, they have a lot of recent history. And the biggest moment to relive is a chase down sack 4 minutes and 8 seconds to go, the fourth quarter, in a week 1 game. That's the biggest moment in terms of at home, crowd excitement, energy. Folks, what I've come to realize is that a lot of the NFL, whether it be media people, fans, other teams, they just envy Dallas so much. They just want to beat Dallas, right? They just want to feel the buzz and the energy. They want the attention that Dallas gets. And so when a former Cowboy, obviously getting a lot of attention with Micah Parsons, they see the attention. This moment right here, Eli Berkovitz, and he's just sort of a stand-in for the rest of the NFL, where he's like, yes, now someone on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, on all the media platforms, they will talk about us the way they were talking about, Dallas. Finally, we're going to get some attention. Finally. That's the world they live in. They want to beat Dallas. They want to beat Dallas. And it's so bizarre to me, right? This is a totally irrational, totally bonkers take. But every single one of these teams, for the most part, I'm talking generally, of course, they want the attention. They want the celebrity. They want the media hype. They want all that. They beg for it. They crave it. Right. And that's why they look at situations like this. They look at their proudest moments are a chase down sack in the fourth quarter of a division game week 1. Like, who cares? This would be like the bottom of the list. This would be a nothing. If you were a serious fan or serious reporter, of course, anyone rational would look at this and say, who cares? But the reality is, because this was a moment where some Packers fans, a storied NFL franchise, a good team, back-to-back playoff seasons, right? It's been a good team for pretty much Matt LaFleur's entire tenure, right? And instead of hyping one of those moments or talking about one of those moments or one of those games, this is what mattered to him when a former Dallas Cowboy made a play. Remember that, guys. Remember that when you see other fan bases or other people criticize Dallas or make a joke about the Cowboys. It's out of jealousy. It's about envy, right? It's so bizarre to me. And once you see it, like, you can't unsee it, because you start noticing it across the entire National Football League, just like we see here with Eli Berkovitz. All right, let's get into the comments. A lot of comments to get to today, so we'll try and power through them as best I can. So we got a new member. This is Gus Theo2537. I appreciate you being a member and joining. It means a lot to me, Gus. You had a long comment, so I had to kind of condense it a little bit, if you don't mind, so please forgive me for doing that. But Gus writes, as for today's episode, you make a great point in your analysis that it does little good for the Cowboys to go after stopgap fix free agents like Stephon Gilmore, who, for example, may serve the Cowboys well this season as one-year rentals, but not serve them as well long-term. Within the context of the Cowboys clearly being in rebuilding mode, I agree that it is not in their best interest to acquire free agents that can only get the Cowboys to the playoffs but not help them advance or into the future. In today's video, you refer to that as doing them little good, but I would take that a step further and call it doing them real harm. That's because those kind of moves keep them from developing the promising young talent that they do have on their roster currently, who in the near term need more game time reps to further their development, but won't get if stopgap solutions are brought in for this season only to take those needed developmental reps away. Also, if the Cowboys make such moves to barely make the playoffs, only to exit them as quickly as they get there, then this creates additional harm, as it will knock them down several notches in all rounds of the upcoming draft. That's too valuable to lose for any rebuilding team like the Cowboys. In my honest opinion, the only strategy the Cowboys should direct as any Cowboys moves as they approach the trade deadline is one that prioritizes acquiring only younger to mid-career free agents who can realistically direct compete with, possibly beat out the Cowboys' current developmental prospects, as they all compete for starting or backup roles, not just for this current season, but more importantly for over the next 2-3 seasons as the team continues to build. Just my 2 cents. Thanks for listening, and thanks again for all you do. No, Gus, thank you for being a member, being a viewer, and a really good comment there. Yeah, I agree with everything you said there, and I talked about it yesterday. There's some people that I think when Michael Carter for the Jets got traded to Philadelphia, like, Dallas, they should have done that. Like, do you not want to see Reddy Stewart develop? Do you not want to see if he can play? Right? There's people out there that are saying Cowboys need to sign, get Gilmore off the bench, get Gilmore off the couch, right? Okay, you don't want to see, how the secondary can play, see if there's anything there, right? There's a lot of people that say, they need to go trade for Logan Wilson, right? Yeah, that's a favorite that some people talk about. Listen, Logan Wilson, he was good a few years ago, and I think he's still got some gas in the tank. But you don't want to develop Shamar James. You don't want to get Leofau more reps, right? You don't want to, keep, make sure Overshown has everything he needs when he gets on the field, right? It's one of those things where you get so focused on, and we can as fans, okay, how can we improve today? What can be good for today? But the reality is long-term success is maintaining that long-term mindset, right? And that's the approach the Cowboys should take. Now, listen, if they get a good player at the right price, by all means, make the move, right? It makes sense. It's a cap-driven business. It's, so if you get a quality player at a discount, add him to the roster. There's nothing wrong with that at all. But I agree 100% with your take here, Gus, is that if it's not going to challenge a younger guy, if it's not going to challenge some of these younger developmental guys, and you're just adding veterans just to add veterans, what's the point? Like, what's the point, right? Just for short-term rentals, just to try and get to 9 wins? Dallas has done that before. You remember Bennett, defensive tackle in 2019? Didn't do anything, right? Listen, he played a lot of football. I think he played okay for Dallas. Dallas still missed the playoffs, okay? Now, it wasn't his fault, of course, but they still missed the playoffs. So instead of maybe developing a younger defensive tackle in 2019, right, that Bennett walked and they went into 2020, and how'd that go, right? How's defensive tackle really been since, if we're being totally honest, right? And I'm not blaming all the Cowboys defensive tackles on the decision to get Bennett in 2019, but you can see when you have a priority of short-term, right, you can only do so much. If your priority is short-term success, or you're trying to maximize short-term results, you will suffer in the long term. That's just the way it works. It's zero sum. If your priority is long-term, a lot of times you'll suffer in the short term. I want the Cowboys to shift their priority more to a long-term focus, and usually that means, unfortunately, there's going to be some short-term pain. All right, David Dobbins, 5887, writes, great show. I wish I had been paid $60 million when my peak was wasted. Having 2 legit wide receivers and a solid run game and a reliable tight end makes a QB look good.
Seriously, he's structurally playing his best in my honest opinion. Wilson, the linebacker, 2 problems fixed. 1 move costs nothing. Then get a safety. Try any quarterback at free safety before benching them. Something like, comment, subscribe, hype. Thank you, David. I really appreciate it, as always. Yeah, I mean, it does help that there's certainly talent around Dak, but he had it in 2019 and 2016 and 21 as well, right? So there have been a lot of years where Dak has had some really good players around, a good offensive line too, veteran offensive line, of course, for the first half of his career. So listen, I think Prescott is playing well for sure. I think he's, in terms of pre-snap and executing the offense, he's doing great. But my larger point is, like I said when I talked about it the first time, was that there's the narrative that people, oh, this is a wasting, Dak Prescott's best year. And you brought up a great point. Like, he's getting paid a lot of money, right? He's basically, to be totally honest, barely making maybe a hair above in terms of performance versus his contract, right? So I would say he's almost meeting expectations, maybe slightly exceeding them, which is great, but it does create a tough situation when you have a quarterback that's getting paid so much money. It means you don't have as much money to spend on defense and other spots, which means your quarterback has to play better. So you do get a little bit of feedback loop there for sure. All right, this next comment is from It's Juma3231. I totally agree with you on Dak's play. I've been saying it for years that Dak can play at an extremely high level. Biased, he was in my top 7 QBs, unbiased top 12 since he entered the league. I even argued that the year he broke his ankle, he should have won MVP because the drop-off of the team was so bad that it was obvious he was the source of our success. The one place I'll disagree with you is that this year feels a tad different than years prior in the sense that this might be the best he's seen the field and managing the game, mostly. I'd also argue that this is the most talented offense he's had to, so don't waste this year. I do think that the next 2 years might truly be Dak's best years, similar how Brady and Peyton got better and better with time. Not saying he's in the same caliber, just how he's developing. Connecting this to a comment from yesterday, I do believe the Cowboys need Dak more than Dak needs the Cowboys. There's too many teams that have been in QB limbo where they spend the better part of a decade looking for a franchise quarterback. Saints, Panthers, Raiders. You drop Dak on the Falcons, they instantly get better. Same with Miami. You can call it fanboying, but if he was on the Vikings, could they be Super Bowl contenders? All that to say, we better appreciate what we have because it could be a lot worse. Yeah, I do think there is sort of, the field different aspect is true, but I think that's coaching, right? In prior years, with talented teams, 16, 2019, 2021, first 5-ish games of 2020, right? Even stretches of 2022, and of course 2023. I mean, they had talent. I mean, listen, certainly 2016, 19, and 21, for sure, they were stacked offensively. You had Prime Elliott still, you had Tony Pollard emerging, Amari Cooper, young CeeDee Lamb in 21, right? In 2019, Randall Cobb, Michael Gallup, right? Dalton Schultz. They had guys, veteran offensive line. They had guys. They had a lot of guys that they could just absolutely overwhelm teams. And they did, right? They led the NFL in offense in 2019, total offense in terms of yards, right? They had some really great performances, and Dak played really well. But I think what this year feels different is that there's better coaching, there's a better scheme, there's a better process, right? And I think that's why people say, oh, this is the best Dak. I think it's the best Dak because it almost looks like he has to do less. Because even in the years where he put up some gaudy numbers, it still felt like, it didn't feel as smooth, right? It didn't feel as sort of execution, was crisp. And I think a lot of that is coaching. A lot of that is X's and O's versus what they have this year with Clayton Adams and Shoddy running the offense and what they've had in prior years. So I think that's why it feels different. But I do agree with you. Everything that Dak is doing this year, there's no reason he can't do it and maybe even be better in the next 2 to 3 years for sure, right? Because he's not doing anything special, right? Is he Lamar Jackson running it, right? Is he making Patrick Mahomes laser beam throws all over the field? Is he running over people like Josh Allen, right? Is he on an unprecedented, he's thrown 1 pick in 8 games kind of thing where it's just like that's not really sustainable for multiple seasons? No, he's on pace to throw double-digit interceptions, right? He's not hitting a lot of big plays compared to other guys, right? He's not, running for a lot of yardage or anything like that. So I think you can make an argument that Dak could even play better in future seasons and certainly shouldn't play a whole lot worse or probably should stay at minimum the same in terms of his performance. It's Juma3231 also then added a little appendix. He said, adding this after finishing the video, yes, we can give talking about Sam Williams, poor play some grace, but coming off an injury doesn't affect personal fouls and dumb, poorly timed penalties. Like you said, offer a cheap 1-year deal, and if he walks, oh well. Yeah, I think that's a great point as well. I think mentally he's made some mistakes, but I do think the physical limitations, I think, and I've been very critical of Williams, but it was a great point that was made yesterday he's coming off a severe injury, but the mental things, I agree that the bad, I think Achilles injury doesn't affect the mental side. Robert Bass, 3667, writes, Nick, you asked the viewers to comment on how you see Diggs, especially being so public about concussion protocol. I did not see your view until you brought it up, and now I think it's possible they could be shopping Diggs around, but I certainly hope not. Yes, he has had a few bad seasons, but he can be good too. My view may not be popular, but I hope Diggs stays with Cowboys. I mean, the number of the contract cap hit is the real problem for next year, right? Because he's underperforming his cap hit significantly. And if that happens and the Cowboys could release him and open up cap space, it just makes sense from that perspective. So unless he comes back and really dominates, I don't see a reason why they keep him around. I really don't. Unless he restructures his deal, takes a super team friendly deal, something like that. I don't think Diggs will. That's just my guess. That's just my assessment. All right, this next comment is from Plague Doctor. I think Dak looks more mature in his reads this year, but he's not playing better than his best seasons. I've always said he's a top 10 quarterback, just not elite. When I think of elite, I think of a quarterback who consistently makes the players around him better and can do more with less. Dak shows that ability at times, but not often enough. That's a really great point because Dak seems to look his best, as most quarterbacks do, when they have great players around them. But if you look at look at Josh Allen, for example, who's a really good quarterback. He looks like an MVP. Lamar Jackson, too, who makes those kind of plays with not nearly as good a talent around them, right? They've got those special skill sets, right? Mahomes can be that way, too, as well. Of course, Brady was like that for large stretches of his career as well. So Dak, of course, is very good, but he's not in that category. I agree 100%. He's a player who thrives with strong infrastructure. When the supporting cast scheme and offensive line are solid, he gives you a real chance to win. He's not like Burrow, who carried a middle-tier defense to a Super Bowl in his early years of playing. Middle-tier defense and a god-awful offensive line. Burrow is one of those guys who I really hope he finds a way to stay healthier. It's tough in Cincinnati because he's a special player who I believe is actually probably underrated because what he does, especially with that lack of blocking and that lack of defense, is very commendable. When I worry about wasting his career, I'm not thinking about this year so much as what it comes 2 or 3 years from now. If the front office keeps sitting out for agency like they have for nearly a decade, that's what will cost them. You can't rely on the draft and reclamation projects alone forever without consequences, and this season is starting to show exactly why. The fact that we made it this far is a credit to our talent evaluators, chief amongst them, Will McClay. And yeah, I really want Wanya Thomas back. I think by now I don't really think Wilson should be playing in the NFL at this point. I don't know if it's just from years of hard hitting, but I can't imagine how he simply forgot to play after 2022. Well, I think part of it is he lost a step, and I think part of it is Dan Quinn and that one-trick pony defense, like I've mentioned a bunch of times. They just told Don Wilson, listen, attack downhill, jump everything, be hyper aggressive, and who cares if you have a coverage bust? Who cares if you get beat? Because we're gonna get after it, the quarterback like crazy. And Donovan Wilson, okay, I can do that, but that just wasn't a real path to being an NFL safety, and we're finding that out now. We found that out last year. He played awful last year too. People may forget that, but he was not a good player for the Cowboys in 2024. And I agree with you that we're starting to see the issues with this roster, and we saw them last year, right? We saw the fact that this was a super top-heavy roster. We saw signs of it in 2023 as well, but in 2024 it was like, wow, the cupboard here is pretty bare, right, in terms of talent on both sides of the football, right? You look at CeeDee Lamb and you're like, okay, who's our other receivers? And you're like, Cooks, who's at the end of his career, yikes, he's banged up, right? You look at the tight end Ferguson. I mean, it's not a great year for him, but the talent around him wasn't there. Offensive line, right? Zach Martin, end of his career, right? Smith is really good, but you're dealing with 2 rookies. Running back position is nothing, right? You look at, okay, your number 2 wide receiver is Jalen Tolbert. It's sort of like, oh my, it was again who fought hard in 2024, but still, defensively, no defensive talent tackle at all, no linebacker room at all. That's Dan Quinn, 100%. That was his strategy. I think that was not a good plan by his part. I think the cornerback room was good, but it got expensive, right? Bland, Diggs, and Jordan Lewis. Almost forgot his name there for a second. He was up for a contract, so it just got expensive. Safety position, again, we talked about Donovan Wilson enough. Defensive end, very top heavy with Micah Parsons and DeMarcus Lawrence, right? So we saw these holes in 2024. And obviously, when injuries take their toll, as they've had this season, as they did in 24, as they do with most teams, of course, the lack of talent really exposes itself. The cupboard gets really bare really quickly when you don't manage it effectively. I'm a big believer you have to use draft and you have to use free agency both, and the Dallas Cowboys have not used free agency effectively at all. I think obviously the acquisition of Pickens, is a good move that I think helped out in some regards. And, obviously Javonte Williams looks like a good find there. But for the most part, they have not done a good job in free agency at all. And I agree with you 100%. It's really hurt them. Randy9441 writes, Nick, so you think Dallas can get Jeffrey Simmons, a guy that both Broadus and Vach think is one of the best defensive tackles currently, eats up and beats double teams on a consistent basis, has 3 times the stats on both tackles and sacks as Kenny Clark, and is also 2 years younger for Clark than one of the first-round picks, and should be hesitant about making the trade. Make it make sense. Well, let me pull up something real quick before I answer your comment. Let me look up Simmons's contract situation right here. All right. So he right now is under contract through 2027. His cap number next year will be $25 million. $5 million would be a dead hit, it looks like, against the Tennessee Titans. So it would only hit the Cowboys at 20 million, and then the year after it would be 23 million. So it'd be, the rest of 2025 and ostensibly the next 2 seasons. So, obviously it's a tough number to make, right? They have the ability to do that with moving off Diggs, Wilson, Hooker, of course, and then restructuring Prescott's deal would open up a ton of money. You could cut Terrence Steele and slide in Nathan Thomas. So they got a lot of options there to make the cap space work. And again, they can, even with the cap space they have, is pretty much most of that's probably going to be for dealing with George Pickens for the most part, right? But they have the options to fit in a guy like Simmons, and I don't hate it. I think the defense needs good players. I wouldn't hate that at all. I just think for a first round pick, it's borderline. Maybe, certainly the Packers first round pick. I'll say it like that. I think if it's the Packers first round pick, that may make sense, right? But I don't disagree that they need quality defensive help. And I think one of the issues Dallas may run into is, okay, we have all these first round picks. We're just going to use them on players. Remember, a first round pick is basically a 50-50 chance. So 2 first round picks basically means you're realistically only going to get one good player. Both players will be cheap and inexpensive, which is nice, but you're only going to get one good player. I would almost rather the Cowboys go 2 first round picks on two players, in the draft, and then use that cheap factor and be more active in free agency. But we know the Cowboys aren't active in free agency, so that's the real issue there. But if they can be active in the offseason in terms of signing veterans and then supplement that with drafting in the first round both guys, I think that's the best approach. But I like Jeffrey Simmons, so if they traded for him, and even if they gave up a first round pick for him, I'd feel, that's a lot, but he's a good player. I'd take it. All right, this next pick is from Sean Sarton, 8793. Next comment, He says, no, bro, I believe they're being open about Diggs' medical because the secondary needs him so much. In my opinion, people are suggesting for the Cowboys to make a trade to help the secondary, but Dallas is pushing back and saying, no, Diggs is coming back and we're going to use him. Yeah, that certainly could be the case. But let me throw this argument back out there, and I'm curious what you think about it, is if you wanted to trade him and you wanted to make him seem like a good player and you didn't say you wanted to have him back, right, his value would drop. Let's say if you were trying to, you're potentially going to trade Trayvon Diggs. And publicly you're like, if someone asks you, is Trayvon Diggs going to come back? You're like, yeah, we don't care. We've moved on from Diggs. Is anyone who wants to potentially trade for Diggs, are they going to be like, hey, we'll maybe give you a 7th because you don't even want him, right? Why would we give you anything for him, right? He clearly can't play because you don't think he can play. Whereas if the Cowboys are publicly saying, hey, listen, yeah, he's a good player, can't wait to have him back. If other teams can call about Diggs, you can be as the Cowboys, we don't really want to trade him. We like him. We've said that about 50 times, but what are you offering, right? It's one of those deals potentially. Travis Graham, 7636 writes, I'm praying we're going to draft this Rodriguez cat from Texas Tech with the second rounder. We could take him off the team right now and he could make an impact. The reason I'm saying this is that there's talent in college football that we could certainly use. Yeah, for sure. There's definitely a lot of guys that, as is in any draft, I'm not a big believer, it's a weak draft, it's a strong draft. In sometimes some positions it can be, right? But I mean, even if you look at, really great drafts at the quarterback position, remember, the draft with Trey Lance, Mac Jones, Josh Wilson, and Justin Fields. That was a great draft at the quarterback position. Trevor Lawrence, great draft at the quarterback position. Was that 2021? Right? Who was good out of that draft? I mean, I think Fields and Mac Jones have turned themselves into serviceable backups for sure. And I think Zach Wilson's still hanging around as a backup. Trevor Lawrence looks solid, but other than that, it's kind of a lot of not so good, right? So just because people may say a draft is good or bad, I don't take too much stock into that. I think every year there's talent that you can use if you evaluate correctly. Andre Barnes, dash T2G writes, Bradley Chubb is a very good player. I would love the Cowboys to get him. Yeah, I mean, the price there is going to be interesting, but I tell you what, he's one of those guys similar to Simmons, although he's not as good. To me, if you could that's something where if you could package a few players, I think that could make sense for cheap because the Dolphins, I think, seem to be in a little bit of a fire sale mode. At least that's the perception. But if the perception is they're in fire sale mode, that's again coming from the insiders and the agents. So I don't know how much truth there is in that specifically, but I would like Bradley Chubb as well. I think he would be a key part of this defense. But again, it comes down to price like anything else. Ronald Alexander 5517 writes, I'm seeing a narrative being formed right now. If Dallas doesn't make a major trade, it will be Jerry's fault. I've seen a content creator saying Philly will give up 3 first-rounders for Myles Garrett, and this is why Dallas loses. I don't need to go into the idiocy of mortgaging the future over an over 30 pass rusher, no matter how good they are. I just want to say it takes 2 to make a deal, and if the deal is not in your favor, then I wouldn't make the deal. Yeah, I think that's really good clarity, and I think having that framework is important. There are a lot of teams, and the Eagles are at the top of the list, where they make deals just to make deals. This is who they are. They make trades all the time. And the vast majority of their deals and trades don't do anything. They don't work out at all. They have minimal or no impact, right? But the Eagles basically just do a lot of deals just because that's just who they are, right? And that's kind of their identity as a team. And I'm not a big fan of that because I'm a big fan of cohesion. I'm a big fan of locker room consistency. The Eagles can get away with it just because they've had veterans like offensive lineman Lane Johnson, for example, that have been around so long that they kind of keep everything stable. Jalen Hurts he's not been around nearly as long, but he has kind of has that role as well. But the reality is, as some of these guys get older, remember Kelsey's gone, right? And you start making these trades and you make all these deals, you insert a little volatility. Is it the right move for Philadelphia? We'll see. You also have to look at the Eagles and understand that because of the way they structure their big contracts, they pushed all the money, void years, into the future. So they're going to have like 30% of their cap, 20 to 30% of their cap just on void years, which means on void dollars, which basically means not like it's like dead money where it's due no matter what. The player's technically going to be a free agent. If you re-sign him, that's extra you owe, right? So you're already going to be paying, for example, AJ Brown will be a free agent, but he'll count against your books $20 million. If you re-sign him for $20 million, now you're paying him $40 million, right? And they have that with a lot of players. So they're looking at it right now and they're saying, listen, we probably should take advantage of this window because things may get tough in a couple of years. And I think that's why we see some teams be hyper aggressive and like, yeah, that's what winning teams do. And listen, it's worked for Philadelphia for sure, but there's a big risk if you do that and it doesn't work out. Look at the Saints, look at the Browns, look at the Dolphins. They took very similar kind of risks, were hyper aggressive, and right now the Dolphins total rebuild, Saints total rebuild, Browns are the Browns. So keep that in mind that for every Philadelphia, you have 3 duds. So it's a tough situation to be in for sure. But I agree, every single deal should be in the context of, is it in our favor for the long term? Right? Never make a deal for a short term, right? I always think that's a bad strategy, unless it's like a nothing burger, like you're giving up like a 7th round pick or something like that. Okay, then fine. But if you're giving up anything of real value, it's got to be a long-term win. If it's a short-term win too, fantastic. But otherwise, it's got to be a long-term win. If it's not a long-term win, if it doesn't help you, and I agree 100%, don't make the deal, right? I'd rather take the criticism of being inactive than doing dumb stuff, right? I'd rather not do dumb stuff. Or ideally, you'd rather do good stuff, right? Obviously, you want to do good things. The second most preferred option is to not do dumb things, right? I would rather that than to just do dumb things for the sake of doing something. Don't be a do something person. Oh, I want you to do something. Do something. Well, you do stupid stuff. How about, if we're not going to do good stuff, which is the preferred option, let's just avoid the bad. I think we can all agree that's not a bad course of action. All right, a lot of comments, like I said today. There's a lot of good ones, to get to. Thanks, Gus Theo, again. New member. Really appreciate all our members. All you guys chime in and have really good insights and thoughts, as always. It's one of the things I love about doing this channel is just reading what you guys have to say and where you're coming from. It definitely gives some good context and clarity. And listen, you guys chop it up in the comment section too. So kind of the discussions, the debate back and forth. I kind of like it because you see sort of ideas meld and come together, some thoughts and things, which I think is pretty cool. Certainly at least interesting. But listen, obviously it's a game day. Dallas doesn't have to play. So get some errands done, get some chores done, relax, watch football, whatever you got to do. And then we've got Monday Night Football, obviously, in about 36 hours, a little bit more, I guess. So I'll be here tomorrow morning as we do, our sort of pregame show, if you will, Monday. And obviously we'll see what the Cowboys do Monday Night Football. But until then, I am Nick, and this is Saturday Morning Inspection.